everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to take a moment to really thank the Rise for hosting us in this beautiful setting. We've been collaborating with the Rise for quite a bit of time now, and looking forward to get back to morning sessions for our Blockchain Breakfast Club. This session is actually a little bit later in the day because Matan took a 2-hour train ride to be able to join us this morning. And right in between of a landing last night and an early flight tomorrow. So thank you for joining us.
Happily.
And we'll just give a brief overview about the Blockchain Breakfast Club. So we at iAngels initiated this expert series with the hopes to get in the room as many entrepreneurs, investors, people who are eager to connect to what's going on the blockchain scene in Israel, and highlight some entrepreneurs and ICOs that are happening to help people better understand some of the hot topics around blockchains, the new developments that are happening. So we started the expert series a few months ago, and every month we are highlighting a different entrepreneur with a different company. And today we're happy to host Matan Field from Daostack. For all of the other related blockchain activity and investments that iAngels is leading, feel free to reach out to any one of our representatives here in the room or online in our website. So great. So we can dive right in, because I think just to set the scene and to level out the playing field, to hear a little bit from Matan, what's the DAO? And kick off from there.
Cool, thanks. Thanks a lot for having me here. Maybe a little bit background by myself.
Wonderful, yeah.
Okay. So I've been educated most of the years in the academy. I've spent a dozen years. I did my bachelor in the Hebrew University in physics and math, and then pursued a PhD in Weizmann Institute in theoretical physics, specifically in string theory, if it says anything to you. And in parallel to that, I was very interested in cooperatives. So, I've been thinking about this problem for about 2 decades, of how companies are not well structured in a way that the alignment of interest of stakeholders and employees and customers are not well aligned. And if you could just align better the interest between different sectors, you'd have less friction.
Was there something in particular that made you look into this 2 decades ago?
Well, I just remember we were coming back from the army at weekends, and we had this kind of little gang, childhood friends, and we were speaking about the economy. I don't know why, but we were kind of passionate about the economy, and with a sense of feeling that it's broken, or it's going to be more and more broken. And that's what drove us to speak about companies and corporations. And yeah, I'm not sure what exactly seeded that. So I was interested in that topic for a long time, and then during my PhD, I also decided to explore that more experimentally. So I founded a food cooperative in Jerusalem, and then a communal garden, which were a great success in terms of objectives, but were a great failure in terms of my experience, in the sense that I felt that it was so hard to cooperate, it was so inefficient. Eventually it just became, if you include all of the costs of our participation and effort, it was just way more expensive than just buying everything on the supermarket. So it was very hard and very inefficient to cooperate. And in a way, I kind of drove back from this thinking for a long time. Thinking about how to cooperate better and at scale. That's most interesting. So then I concentrated back on my research. I did the PhD, then I did postdoc for 2 years, and then I had an idea for a ride-sharing application.
Ride-sharing?
Yeah, ride-sharing, real-time ride-sharing application. So it doesn't exist yet, but a lot of companies are trying to pursue it right now, including Waze and MoveIt. So basically, just the idea that I had this idea when one morning I drove from, I lived in the Galilee, and I drove this morning to the Technion, and suddenly just I noticed that I'm driving on the road, and then about a few thousands of cars driving next to me, and all of us are just one person in the car. And it for that moment, it seemed crazy. Like I thought that if I could just hop between cars, I could get very easily from home to the Technion and back, with the cost of a bus. If I just participate with gas costs. So I started with a few friends from my village in the Galilee. We started to work on this project as a night shift. Days I still did my postdoc, and almost 2 weeks after we started, we discovered the blockchain. That was 2013, October 2013, and basically I was completely struck and amazed, and felt that was exactly the technology that I was missing when I was thinking about cooperation, and I realized that cooperation at scale should be very different from cooperation at large scale is very different from cooperation at small scale. So small scale cooperation is social, and large scale cooperation is programmatic, which is very different. It's in a way it's asocial. So much more like the way bees cooperate. They don't interact directly. They actually have rules coded in their DNA, and they interact at scale much more efficiently. In biology, it's called stigmergy. So that's inspired me a lot, and then basically, roughly since then, I was working full-time. It took me 6 months to actually quit the academy, and then since then I'm working full-time on designing protocols and platforms and products for large-scale cooperation.
I find that fascinating. I think the DAO is one of the topics that I think is really hits close to home to everyone, because it talks about how organizations are going to be working large scale in the future, how we are going to be interacting with colleagues and with our organizations, et cetera. So I know I've had an opportunity to speak to a lot of people also in our organization that find this fascinating. And I remember when I was working at IBM in New York, it was the first time in my life that I worked in a completely virtual setting. So we had a team that was working on a project, and each person was someplace else, specifically in the US, but it was amazing to me to see how efficient it was, and it's counterintuitive to think that if each person knows their role and their contribution to a specific project, how does that actually end up being a lot more efficient and fruitful. And when I think about the future and kind of the way our children are going to interact with the business world, and how everything is going to be a lot more like a decentralized organization, I think it's really exciting. So let's hear a little bit more about what it means to you, and talk about kind of the DAO, the decentralized organizations, and for people to kind of understand a little bit more how it actually works in a blockchain setting.
Sure. So firstly, let me throw some observation. So there is one common factor for any organization, any economic organization on the planet that ever have been here, which is it becomes less effective as it grows. So I'm speaking mostly about large organizations. I'm not speaking about startups. Startups can become more effective as they grow. But if you see asymptotically, at the tail, about large organizations, all of them become less effective as they grow. And the reason is very obvious. Basically, an organization, a company, a firm is just a tool, a setup to align interests of many actors towards a co-action, a joint action at scale. Now, the more people you have, the more interest you need to align, the more individuals you need to coordinate, the harder, stronger the structure that you need to have. And basically, more structure brings more friction, less agility, and less effectivity. So that's a completely universal rule. And that's basically the main bottleneck of large organizations today. So they become less effective, and you just see that, if you have friends in large organizations, just see that none of them are really passionate about what they are doing, because they are not emotionally engaged with with the company, with its goals. It's just a job for them, and
they feel insignificant. They feel very small.
Yeah, they feel that, and they feel also. I also say usually that there is an emotion that we haven't named. So I'll just describe that emotion. We can name it together. So there is this emotion that people, I think everyone experiences it, which is they don't get back the value that they're actually contributing to the organization that they belong to.
That they feel that they're contributing.
Yeah, they feel they contribute more than what they get back. Specifically in large companies. So, yeah, so there's these things that large companies are becoming ineffective, and they lose this kind of like, you know, this liveness of startups that you see in startups often. So this is the main bottleneck for growth and effectivity of large organization. Now, on the other hand, there is another way to coordinate people at scale, which is markets, right? It's free markets. Free markets are amazing in coordinating people at scale. In fact, they're so good at it that they become more and more effective as they grow, right? Large market become more effective as it grows. The problem, though, with the market, that the market is not good in aligning interests. It's just the opposite. It creates increasing competition, and it's not drivable. You cannot drive the market to achieve certain goal. You cannot drive the market to solve, I don't know, even if you look globally, you cannot drive the market to solve ecological problems, right? The market just grows, and that's it. That's the only thing the market can do. So these were kind of like the two main fronts, I think, human species took in the last few decades, in the last few centuries. And then we believe that DAOs is a new form of human association. It's just coming about, just around the corner. Very similar to the transition that we experienced with the internet, but for the realm, instead of just information distribution, the realm of work and cooperation. So it's a new form of organization that behaves somewhat like startups. So it's a tool to align interest and drive in a very agile way towards achieving certain goals, but then it also behaves like market, which becomes more and more effective as it grows. So I call that super scalable organizations, basically. So super scalable, the definition of super scalable means they're becoming more effective as they grow. What it looks like, right? So firstly, well, there are many things that can be said about those organizations, but firstly, a lot of people, we call them DAO, decentralized autonomous organizations. Now, I have to warn you, if you later look at the literature, look at companies, the word DAO nowadays is being used very liberally. So you'll find a whole array of things that people call DAO to. So I will have my own definition, for this morning, which is it's a super scalable organization. So organization that become more and more effective as they grow. Now, firstly, what will happen? Well, this thing will burst into life, and I think very soon. Any super scalable phenomena that we've encountered in the past, and particularly two, markets and the internet, both are super scalable. Once they, once we give them birth, they're a little bit effective, and then they grow, but then they are more effective, so they grow faster, and they are more effective, and they grow even faster. So they hit an exponential curve and basically just eat up their container. Once they reach the container size, they slow down, and that's basically the famous S-curve that any network effect application ever hit. Yeah. So we are predicting that there will be a new organization that will just eat up the whole economic space because it will become more effective than any other corporate structure around it.
Be one?
That's a great question. So the reason why it won't be one is because, markets, just the meaning that they are not drivable, they are not orientable, is that they only have one dimension. They are one-dimensional creatures. They just grow economically. The beauty of DAOs is that you can actually orient them. So you have DAO, it has a certain value system, certain missions, certain direction. So those people who are aligned with that mission, will... So
it'll be like one organization with many different vectors. And
well, it will be many different organizations with many different vectors. Some of them will be complementary and some will be competing, about the same domain with different value systems, and then there will be economic evolution like everything.
Very interesting. Okay, great. So now, for people who do look at the literature, there is like the famous story about the DAO, the famous DAO, and what went wrong. So share a little bit about kind of like your perspective, so that people here are a little bit more aware.
Yeah, it's called the DAO. It was very the DAO, the very very unique name. It was I think it was a beautiful. By the way, back then I've been working on the same topic like about 2 years before, and it was really interesting to see how it kind of came up and fell down. It was a beautiful experiment. I think it proved a lot of the assumptions that we hold, and also emphasized a lot of the problems that now we're solving. So firstly, in terms of the assumption that it proved, so the DAO, what was the DAO? The DAO was basically a decentralized VC, venture capital. So people said, there is a contract here on the blockchain. Anyone can purchase its token. You can send Ether to the contract. You get the DAO tokens. These DAO tokens are basically your shares of the DAO, of that fund. And then we will create together a large fund. And then we will collectively make decisions how to invest in projects from that fund. Very simple, right? So firstly, the amazing thing, and I think that was exactly showing our assumption, the level of excitement that it triggered in the minds, I think also hearts of people. Like it raised $150 million in 5 weeks. And we're not speaking about the days, this year that we saw, Bancor, $150 million and many other Status and, easily $200 million projects. This was in days that the $5 million raise was really beautiful, okay? And this project suddenly they put the contract alive and in 5 weeks raised $150 million. So I think it was beautiful to see how it triggered really the anxiety of people for a different form of association. But then anything else was completely broken. Basically, there were holes in almost any layer of the stack. So when you say decentralized governance, there are different layers you can fail with. There is the blockchain itself layer, which was actually good. That was Ethereum. Still no holes found yet. And then there is the contracts, the code that you write on the blockchain. There's a lot of ways to fail with that. And then even if your code is intact, there is the game theoretic, like the rules, how people cooperate, the logic, which can definitely fail. Like you can make logics that people can exploit and basically steal money. And basically this organization was corrupted in almost all, like in both game theoretic level and in code was completely broken. Now people mostly notice the failure in the game theoretical level, and then they halt all activity. So basically there were like 11 people that had a signature that they could halt activities just for that purpose. And they basically announced that they will not approve any activity until it's fixing the governance layer. And we actually, back then, we were a group that were working on governance, so we were kind of like, we got internal messages that will be, basically, we will be funded in order to solve that problem. So we started to work on fixing the governance layer of the DAO. And then what happened is that after like a couple of weeks, after it was starting operating, someone found a bug in the code and exploited that bug and basically stole $60 million of the fund in a couple of hours, which was
catastrophe.
Yeah, it was funny catastrophe. I remember I woke up in the morning, I got like 30 messages because I was invested in the DAO, and I got like 30 messages from my peers that telling me the DAO is being eaten up alive. It was eating like I think $30,000 a second. It was just really happening. And everyone kind of like rushed in to cash out. You could cash out your coins if you made fast enough. So I cashed out.
Were you fast enough?
Yeah, I cashed out. My computer collapsed and I reopened it. And then I cashed out and just like, I think 30 seconds after I cashed out, the whole thing collapsed and basically the whole thing stopped.
Do you think, by the way, people are hesitant to re-engage in DAOs because like in DAO projects because of that experience?
Yeah, I think so. Very, very much so. But I think it's a good thing. I'll tell you why. There is a well-known phenomena where, and actually I'll give you another one which I'm also involved in, where there is a domain, and then the first actor of that domain make a huge fail, but then for one of two reasons, which I'll describe, is basically creating a vacuum that no one wants to touch that domain again. And then for a long time, for like a couple of years, no one does anything on that domain, but that allows for a lot of maturity and opportunity to arise. And then when you get there back, mature enough, you get a much better result. Yeah. So the same happened actually for my first project, the ride-sharing one, Lazuz. What's happened there is that we were the first, one of the 3 first applications on the blockchain in the world. Back then it was on the Bitcoin blockchain. And we were so famous in the space, again, like in the small niche of the blockchain space, we were so famous that basically everyone thought that, okay, ride sharing is solved, we will not do that. But then since the project stopped, but nobody knew that, so for like 3 years, nobody did anything about ride sharing. But I kept get calling of people, what about Lazuz? We want to do ride sharing, is it already completed? So we created that vacuum basically, and now there is a huge opportunity about ride sharing because it's one of the best applications of the blockchain. So the same thing happened for the DAO.
Interesting. You feel like a miss there? You should have stayed in the ride sharing business?
No, I still no, but I still think it's one of the greatest application, and I think there is a huge opportunity there. My passion is here where I am, so I'm happy.
Perfect. So I think like the dream of so you described like the DAO about creating a big fund and investing together and having a central governance system. But I think like when we consider organizations, like in the context that we know them today, it brings to life questions like how each person or employee is going to contribute, how their contribution is going to be evaluated, how are they going to be compensated, like a lot of different things. For organizations which have product, but it could have like any other sort of service or product. So when we look at companies, do you think there are going to be maybe in the close range in terms of timeline, companies that are going to be able to completely rely on this kind of system and logic to operate and not incorporate and not go through kind of like more traditional structures that we're familiar with today?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think we are actually launching the system this week. The end of this week or beginning of next week for early experiments, internal experiments, and probably external early experiments next month. And I think that, well, although the technology will keep maturing for the next 2 years even, and not only our technology, but also the blockchain technology itself is constantly maturing. Still, I think there is a level of maturity which is sufficient for real experimentations. And
by experimentation, do you think there will be like hybrid models or like complete models on the DAOs that just have challenges, but it'll take time to figure out?
So we'll see pretty real models, real decentralized models, almost from the beginning. Like we are going to put a real fund, like a real fund that can be played decentralizedly. So yes, it's not 100% decentralized as you would imagine maybe in 2 months from now, but it will be pretty much so. And I think we'll see pretty soon, like in a few months time frame, I think we'll see already like more mature experimentations. And yes, it will take a long time before companies. It's easier to do experimentation. Like for example, I speak with a lot of the biggest player in the blockchain space, so like the Ethereum Foundation, for example, and many other big players. And all of them are excited about this, and all of them are willing to say, you know what, why not? We will put $100,000 here. We'll experiment with that decentralized fund. Why not? It's easier to convince a whole company to transform its whole operation, and this will take time because there is a trust level that will need to be built, and also there is fine-tuning of the technology that must occur.
But transforming existing corporations is one thing, but there are companies that start every day. So can startup companies that want to start up, instead of going through incorporation, just
I think so. I mean, I'm already being asked constantly by people that are wanting to form new companies on the platform. So I think so. Yeah, there is less to lose when you form a new company, and I think this kind of companies we'll see in a very near future. And again, like maybe it will take a few months to ramp up, to test the technology, to fine-tune the parameters, and so on and so forth. But I think it's very much around the corner.
So when we look at that kind of reality, that projects can, with your technology, do it in a few weeks, are there other projects that allow companies to create DAOs and start working today already? Or
yeah, none yet is alive. I would also say that none of them is actually producing what I call DAO. I mean, they're producing structures on the blockchain, but as far as I know, anything that we've seen so far is something that would not scale. Like would work like kind of like small company, but on the blockchain maybe a little bit large company, but not something that what I describe as a super scalable organization, where just imagine there are thousands of collaborators, millions of collaborators. It can be around building product, open source developers. It can be investment fund. It can be millions of people that are insuring each other, creating a decentralized insurance network without any insurance company in the middle. It can be millions of people curating elements like restaurants or websites or anything. And then just imagine there is no kind of like governance body, but rather there is just an algorithmic way where agents can make decisions, but a sophisticated, and that's where basically we bring most of the value. So basically, so far, all of the projects in the space, the approach that I've taken is that there is a regular governance body, so like a cooperative. So everyone vote. So we have a fund right now. We want to fund that project. We make a vote. If the vote succeeds, we fund it.
It's just a democratic vote?
Kind of like democratic vote, but maybe with weighted, for example, the DAO that your vote is weighted by the number of tokens that you're holding, okay?
Like a product average.
Yeah. So these are the kind of approaches that we're taking. The problem, though, is that it just simply doesn't work. It doesn't work because if you try to make the consensus for decisions too strict, it's completely dysfunctional. Like you cannot, anticipate everyone. Anything done if everyone are voting on everything. It's completely dysfunctional. And then on the other hand, if you make the threshold for consensus too low, it's completely not resilient. Like basically, a small group of agents can kidnap the system very easily. And people didn't find a way out of that kind of like deadlock. So we designed a whole new protocol for governance, which doesn't just mimic the way that companies work. It's really a new logic for governance that ensures that although small group of people can take decisions on behalf of the greater DAO, there is a game that ensures that those decisions basically are in line with what majority would think.
How do you do it?
So Bitcoin actually brought two revolutions and not one. So the first thing that Bitcoin brought is consensus, or the blockchain itself, if you want. So the blockchain or consensus is the first thing that Bitcoin taught us. The second thing is crypto economics. So crypto economics is basically the game to incentivize people for certain activities at the individual level, and by that create the desired macroscopic emergent phenomena at the collective level. Blockchain is one example. Like you just make a software, you say, okay, whoever runs that software on his computer will get such and such nonsense tokens. And people do that because they understand that if everyone do that, these nonsense tokens will be worth much value later. So those who have the insight do that. They are called miners, and they make huge profit today. Or those who made it earlier made huge profits. So this is called crypto economics. But the thing is that now with Ethereum, you can design your own crypto economics. Like whatever, you can design what is this activity that people should do that will create the collective behavior that you want to create, you want to trigger. So we call that crypto economics. So the way we solve that problem is by basically creating an additional game layer on top of our governance body. So there is this governance body, but which is much more flexible. So basically, small groups can take decisions on behalf of the larger DAO, but there is some delay to their decisions, small delay. And then there is a game where anyone, not from this DAO, anyone can look at decisions and basically find mismatches. So if I see a decision, I say, well, I'm willing to put $1,000 that this decision over here will never pass in that DAO. I mean, they try to pass it, but I know that DAO they will never pass, and I can stake $1,000 on that, my claim at the station. And if I'm eventually correct, I will make profit of it. And if I'm not correct, I will lose money. So we're creating crypto economic incentive to find glitches between edge decisions and the center alignment.
But then doesn't it create then the need for the game to have significant traction, people to actually engage and be willing to risk their own money, etc., to vouch for specific decisions that were made on behalf of like the small group?
Yes, but it's just like Bitcoin. I mean, in the early days, there is more need to find people, but there's also more potential profit to make. So there will be those crazy people that see that and make those profits. So it's using economic. And you see, what we've done is that exactly. I told you that the DAO is a combination of markets and like decision bodies, organization. So we've just splitted those two functionality because eventually governance is about two things and not one. It's about making decisions and it's about signaling. Like we call it sometimes choice making and sense making. So first you need to understand what's happening around you, and then you can make right choices. So the thing is that governance body are very good in decision making, but they are very bad in sense making. They are very bad in large scale sense making because they don't have the capacity. Markets, on the other hand, are very good in signaling and sense making at large scale, but they are very bad in decisions on on general directions. So we basically split those two modes, and the market does one, and the governance does the second.
So we've said governance so many times in our conversation. Do you think, like, technically, if I can take the great book of rules and laws and just like encode them, then potentially I don't need any government system. Do you think we'll see governments adopting DAOs?
Right. So there are a few things to say about that. So firstly, the way that the DAO works right now and works well, or will work soon, is that it's purely digital. So it's like a global startup, global village. So it's aphysical, if you want. So once you're speaking about things that are physical, there is more complications, and you need kind of like to also translate the physical to the digital. So there are ways to do that, and there are people who are working on it. But I think it will take more time to decentralize physical entities that have physical, boundaries and all that, than it will take to decentralized digital entities, non-physical. So that's the first comment. But I think it's also happening. The second comment is that just as corporations, the invention of the big corporations, basically, in a way, kidnapped the governance. Like today, corporations are much stronger, I think, than governments. So we have governance, but effectively, a lot of them are controlled by corporations to a decent extent. So I think what will be happening here is the same. Like we will create a new kind of corporation, which will be yet much stronger. So clearly, even if you have physical governances, I think much of the impact will actually be dominated by digital decentralized corporations.
When I was last year, I was in Shanghai, and I saw that every single traffic light is being digitally monitored and video cameraed, and like if you drive at night, then every intersection there's a flash, like you're being constantly monitored. And I'm just thinking, like even the road system, it's like the first thing that could definitely go digital. Like everything there is just zeros and ones.
Yeah, totally. It's already happening. I mean, autonomous cars is just around the corner. I think it goes there. Maybe it's a good opportunity also to say like what's on stake. Like I think, we need to be fair and say that. So firstly, this revolution is happening anyway. Like if we are doing it somewhere else, this revolution is happening. So no doubt about it. Secondly, this revolution has two endpoints. One very optimist, one very pessimist. Like you can, and I'm saying that because you just mentioned China. Like the way, the risk with decentralizing governance is that you are governed by something that you don't understand. Actually, I wanted to say in the beginning that a lot of people that I speak with, they say DAOs, DAOs, DAOs all the time, but then when you speak with them how they capture DAOs, they have in mind the same centralized body. Like they say, okay, I want my company to be a DAO, but I also want to have control to make sure that it works. And that doesn't work, of course. That's the whole purpose of decentralization, that nobody has control. And we are still trying to imagine DAOs as something that we are familiar with, just as if people try to imagine the internet as something that we're familiar with, and eventually it's something that they could not imagine. So what I'm saying is that eventually decentralized organization will be something that none of us is actually controlling, and none of us maybe imagine the situation where millions of people cooperating, and none of them actually has the full image, the full picture of what's going on. Like none. Just as none of us have the full picture of what's going on the internet.
But you can also be a contributor.
You can be a contributor, you can be a large contributor, you can also decide that you don't like that organization, you fork into a new organization with a new value system. But what I'm saying is that this lack of control can go to a very, very optimist situation where basically a lot of people are cooperating to make something better in the world. And it can also become into a situation where everyone are controlled, but they're not aware that they are controlled by some, blackish governance style, such as in China. And I think there is and you're mentioning monitoring, and that's true. I just read this morning that there is, I don't remember, I think 160 million cameras monitoring China right now. So yeah, I think this, and I think this is like our responsibility to make sure we are putting that revolution on the right track.
Yeah. So if we're talking about our responsibility, or like, let's talk about Daostack, because you're going to be one of the first organizations to allow and create your own fund. Do you eat your own dog food? Like your team, you decide? What kind of governance system is there in your company?
We are a few partners, and by it's pretty centralized. You know, we need to make it also work. But we are going to start eating our dog food from day one. Like from once the system will be on the air, we're going to put a fund on that system and then invite people around, like the greater community, to be involved in the project and contribute. And true, it will not be like 100% centralized from day one. It will be a gradual decentralization. But we're planning to make like true decentralized experiments like very, very early on. We really believe in dog fooding. I think that's the only way. By the way, commenting on that, there is like people try to build complex systems. So a DAO is a complex system, you know, just in nature. It's a complex system. And people think they can build complex system. But the truth is that you cannot build a complex system. What you can do, you can design its elements, you can design its dynamics, the rules, and then you can design its initial condition. That's all. And then if you make a good job, you get a good complex system emerging from that. But then the only way to actually get the right endpoint is to create an evolution in the rules, to create an evolution and let your system evolve towards the right place. So I think there is no other way but exploring, experimenting, eating our own dog food. So
I remember we spoke a while back about this fund, about how you guys want to invest in DAO projects. Is that still like the case? What do you think you're going to use the funds for? Yeah,
sure. So we are planning to raise right now. We are in the midst of raising funds right now. We've already raised a bunch of millions, and now we are in the process to raise 30. And basically the goal of that fund is to, we want to kind of like decentralize in process. So about a third of the funds will go to the company to support further development in a responsible way. But then the other 2/3 will be actually placed on a fund that will be used via the system itself in order to invest in projects. So, and we are not going to repeat the mistake of the DAO. We're not going to put all of the $20 million on the contract. We're going to put it in a foundation in Gibraltar, and then those funds will basically liquidated to the contract gradually as people in the contract are using them. And half of that fund will be invested in projects that build the structure itself, so build applications, build the stack, and so on and so forth. And another half of the fund will be invested in projects that come up on top of the stack. So it will be kind of like a decentralized incubator.
Excellent. So if we're talking about that fundraising experience, or to a point where you're now like so close to launching and already in the midst of your fundraising effort for some of the entrepreneurs in the room, people are thinking about a similar process. Is there anything that you can share from your experience about kind of the do's and don'ts, what went well, what you should avoid, what are the challenges?
Yeah, it's such an active domain right now. 4 years ago there were non-ICOs, and then actually it was one ICO, Mastercoin, and then there was 1 year after there were ICO in 6 months, and then 1 year after there was one ICO once in a year, then 1 year after it was 5 in a month, and now I think there are 50 every month. So it's a very exponentially fast growing. And also the common best practice has changed constantly. The regulation changed, the level of audience that you need to compete with changes, the kind of audience changes. So everything that I'll say right now will be probably irrelevant in 2 months from now. But basically, we took a very non-typical, I would say, road in here. I'm proud to say that, but I think we took a very non-typical. So about 99%. So firstly, maybe 90% of the projects are completely, I don't know. I don't want to sound too harsh, but like either scams or just bad projects. So there is a huge noise. So the signal to noise is very, very strong. But then, so then even those who are really good projects, like 99% of the projects are basically first an idea, maybe a team, and then they try to raise the funds and then to build a product. In that case, most of your effort in the campaign has to be, like aggressive marketing. That's the only thing that you can actually sell if you want.
Promote,
yeah. Yeah, promote. The best project, I think, are just the opposite. So the few of them that I'm aware of right now in the space, they're just the opposite. They actually built a full product first, and only then went to raise, and we're included. And then they have much more organic marketing. For example, showing up in the most important conferences and getting real traction and real followers. And then the thing, though, is that we realize that even though we have that organic traction, in this day, we still need to make like some sort of like non-organic marketing campaign, still to float up, with respect to the other.
There's some sort of kind of expectations of, how to promote an ICO that you have to meet. So.
Right. So there's a lot of dimensions in there, in marketing, but also in regulations right now. It's very harsh. So there's a lot. I think maybe the one recommendation is to really be careful right now, because last week the first few subpoenas from the SEC in the US have started to be sent out. So we are very careful with that.
Are you avoiding the US, or are you listing? Are you registering? What are you doing?
So we took the route to sell in the US only to accredited investors and be fully regulated within that. Mm-hmm. Lastly, there is also the technology and especially the security. So there's a lot of ways to fall with the security of the contracts. But now it's pretty common best practice. Like you have to take it seriously and outsource to professionals to to audit your contracts.
I mean, I could go on for a long time because I love to hear you speaking. One of the best speakers that I've had a chance to sit down with. But I want to open up for questions because usually it's the best part of the event.
The collective behavior, creating the collective behavior. Because to me it seems if nobody's owning it, the very person that's going to be the sense maker, it's like traditional advertising. They're going to be owning the potential votes. Am I understanding that correctly?
This is definitely, it's definitely something you need to take into account. So basically, like that's true also in real politics, right? If you can do marketing well. True. The beauty of these systems is that you can have more control on your design. You can make if you want a more refined design. For example, let's say that you can promote an agenda. What in this system you can also make it that let me distinct two different things. There is let's give it a name, okay? There is off-chain and on-chain. Off-chain we don't control anything, and that's just the same, right? Off-chain means like if someone is doing a TV show and calling for people, I cannot control that. But on-chain I can control by design. So the beauty of this kind of system, which you can design more refinedly, is that you can actually make more protection. For example, you can let people to build momentum as you suggest and basically influence others, but you can also require a stake to do so, such that the people have more to lose. For example, if they do so, but then others, eventually the organization somehow tag that as improper activity, that agent can also lose reputation or influence power in that organization. So you can design, but that's definitely part of the design for DAOs that need to take into account all of the game theoretic aspects. We call it like attack vectors, or faulty behavior, but what you're suggesting is certain attack vector.
I have two questions. Can you maybe walk us through exactly how your product works, like end-to-end? An entrepreneur comes, he takes the product, what does he do exactly? And the second question is, I think it would be interesting for people to hear about all the partnerships and kind of the traction that you've accomplished thus far.
Sure. So let's start with a product. So there is an easy one, there is a harder one. Let me start with the easy one. So I'll tell you what's the problem. So imagine that we're building the internet. We're kind of like building a stack, like the internet stack, okay? But we also understand that in order for people to really realize what's going on, we need to build an application. So imagine that we're building internet, and we're building, let's say, WordPress. If you're not familiar with WordPress, it's like it's an application to build websites because we want a lot of adoption. But then we're also building, an application. We're building Airbnb, so people understand what you can do with this internet. So that's exactly the situation here. We're building the full stack for governance, and then we're building this kind of like WordPress, like the application to build organizations, and we're building also a specific application that you can actually do something with it, so people can actually adopt it and understand what's going on. So it's easy for me to tell you, and I will tell you firstly about the application itself, but then I will also remind you that there is much more to that, and I'll try to allude to the ecosystem that we created around that. So in terms of application, what it does, so at this point, we started with a narrower scope, and we will enlarge it soon. So the narrower scope right now, it's basically answering an existing pain in the blockchain community itself, okay? So there's a lot of companies in the blockchain community. The one special thing about the blockchain space, I don't know if people are aware of, is that the very most projects are open source, which is very unique. Like in the regular startup scene, no project open source its code in the early days. It's insane. And
like their IP.
It's like their IP, right? And in the blockchain space, everyone open source their code, and there is a reason for that. I'm actually writing a blog post on that. So all the projects are open source, and what that does is that they can involve an external community to interact with the project. So for example, Ethereum itself, let's take the Ethereum project itself. It has a market cap of $100 billion. The Ethereum Foundation controls a few $1 billion. So they have insane resources, right? They also have insane human resource like HR, right? There are like thousands, not thousands, like hundreds of thousands of developers that potentially can contribute to the code. And thousands of really professional developers. So there is no lack of human resources. And still, they are not able to engage large development community around the project. And specifically, right now, the biggest problem of the Ethereum project is the scalability problem of the blockchain. So the Ethereum blockchain itself is not yet scalable. And there's a huge amount of resources and of efforts put in that direction. And still, there is no way for the Ethereum Foundation to engage thousands of developers to solve together the scale problem, okay? And the reason is just the governance reason. So for example, right now, Ethereum came and said, we are going to put huge fellowship. Any team that will come with suggestion to solve anything about scalability will get between $50,000 to $1 million, like that. But it doesn't work well. Why? If it would work well, thousands of teams will submit applications. But then those thousands of applications will need to be screened by 5 to 10 people in the committee. They can screen maybe 10 applications in a month, and then most applications will be denied or just not answered. Now, since everyone knows that, to begin with, nobody applies, right? So this is exactly a governance problem. So we are providing the first application, and there are handful of projects of the same. So for example, and that's also related to the second question, we have partnered with Gnosis, which is one of the leading companies in the space, and they are now holding their own tokens with a market cap of something like $700 million, and they really want to distribute those tokens into developers that will develop applications on top of their platform. But again, they don't have an efficient way to do that. So projects like Gnosis and Ethereum Foundation and so on and so forth could use our tool in order to take a existing fund of Ether, Gnosis tokens or whatever, and basically let the community, so let anyone to come with proposals to what to do with that fund. So I can propose even something at a scale of like $200,000, but I can also even propose something at a scale of $5,000. I want to promote something. I want to build a repository. I want to make an audit to this contract. And anyone can come with a proposal, and then the community at large, whatever the project defined the initial condition for the community to be, the community can screen those proposals and basically vote on them and decide about budgeting. So it's a decentralized budgeting and rewarding application. So that's our initial product. The extension of that product will be a full management of DAOs. So to your question, so right now it's not fully decentralized in the sense that like the project that it's, I mean, it is decentralized, but it's kind of like the way that it's built is kind of the user experience is built more towards companies that build decentralized funds to support their open source community. Later on, it will be a full decentralized organization platform. So that's in terms of the product, and we already have a bunch of partnerships around the product. We have, maybe let me tell you the second part of the product, because also related to partnerships. The second part of the product is just the stack for governance. So now we've built one application, but you can think of like hundreds other applications also about collaboration. It could be, for example, there's an application that does hiring and task management. But it can also be non-collaboration application. It can be decentralized insurance network. It can be decentralized journalist media network. And all of them require collective decision-making to some extent. And then we're providing the whole stack for these governances at scale on the blockchain, so that if you're now building a collaborative application, you don't need to build the engine for decision-making. You can just, like you have an API, you have a connection layer, you can just integrate with and get this collective governance out of the box. So now we have a wide area of partners in both domains. So we have partners that already have their applications and they're connecting to our stack to get decision-making, collective decision-making out of the box. And we have other applications like Gnosis that are going to use our tool in order to distribute their own tokens. So we have, I mean, Gnosis is one of them. We have Sapien, which is a network that just raised like $20 million, and they're going to connect our stack. Menlo, we are speaking with Ethereum Foundation about perhaps using our tool. We're speaking with L4, the blockchain accelerator in Canada. We're speaking with BlockKicks, which is a startup by Dimitri Buterin, Vitalik's father. We're speaking with, I just met last week actually the best use cases ever. Maybe I can tell you about that because it's a really fantastic. Like it's actually the proof to what we're claiming. So I met the CEO of Rloop. So who heard about Elon Musk? Okay.
So everybody.
Okay, so Elon, he's like one of the top entrepreneurs in the world today. He's been like magnificent projects. SpaceX, for example, is one of them. Tesla. So he came up also with the idea of Hyperloop, which is basically a new form of transportation, very efficient, very fast, completely changing the way we think about transportation. So the principal technology is already there, but there's a lot of engineering that needs to be taken place, and it was kind of like postponed for many years. And then eventually decided to open up for the public. So he made a competition. He said, I put this kind of prize. Whoever build the closest technology to Hyperloop gets a prize. So Rloop, that I just met their CEO, is the winning team. They won the contest a couple of years ago.
What was the prize?
I don't know the prize. I think the prize was just actually the real prize is just to be the winner. Yeah, I think more than the money, but note the condition. So firstly, they've built a full working technology, half the speed, fifth the scale, fully working prototype. Okay. They are 1,300 engineers from 60 countries, never met before. Completely decentralized, only working by emails, okay? Their competitors that lost the competition were two companies, well, the three leaders, the three most successful ones. The second one was a company that raised $350 million, and the third one was another company that raised $200 million. Both failed to actually deliver the technology. And they delivered that technology with a budget of $200,000. So 1,300 decentralized engineers. And this is exactly the future that we're speaking about. So they are not yet fully decentralized, but it's pretty amazing what's happening there. And we met, and they were completely like amazed by our technology, and they're like really super excited to work with that. So these are kind of like partnerships that we are building right now.
Yes.
Hi. I thought maybe we should introduce ourselves a little bit. I'm Gilad Darner. I'm the brand new project lead of eToro's GoodCoin. So you mentioned the DAOs hack. Now the problem there was that the code had built-in vulnerabilities, and it was very, very hard to fix them because once the code is up on the blockchain and everybody's using it, so you can't fix it. Yeah. So how can you address such issues with DAO if you're like moving the entire management of companies into that? And also, like you spoke about scalability, and Shelly also spoke about scalability. The Ethereum network is like very clogged at the moment. It's very hard to do anything because it's very crowded, and like every day during ICOs it's very slow, and it's limited to 14 transactions a second. So, and you're trying to increase scalability, but you're relying on the Ethereum network. So, and I don't think that like the projects that are going to efficientize the Ethereum network will make it on time to solve scalability. So how would you relate to that?
Right, so let's start with vulnerability. So vulnerability, this is a very known problem and also very well solved already. So basically, so the entire framework that we designed is completely modular. That's like that's the elegance of it. So there is no like large, huge, big contract. Rather, there are like many tiny contracts that speak with each other. So that once a contract is heavily used and battle tested, you can use it in other cases. It's very easy to adapt it. Secondly, not like the DAO. Secondly, it's completely upgradable. Like you can upgrade the entire architecture. You can upgrade. So the rules of the organization includes the rules to change the rules, and includes the rules to change the technology. Like the whole organization can vote to migrate the entire organization to a new architecture, to a new technology. It's part of the code. Yeah, and you have like when you start an organization, you define the rules for the organization, including the rules to change the rules, including the rules to change the technology. So that's that question. So that's well treated already. Scalability is indeed the largest problem of the blockchain. In fact, that's a good thing for us. I'll tell you why. And by the way, that's I mean, I've said that for years, and then I've seen some time ago. I've seen Andreas and I never can say his surname, Antonopoulos, I think. Andreas Antonopoulos. He has a great talk where he's exactly saying what I'm going to say now. Basically, because of the scale problem of the blockchain, the first applications, there is a huge discussion in the space talking about what would be the killer app of Ethereum. Like we're all waiting, the killer app, right? Just because of scale problem, the killer app would be that app that is viable with low frequency events, okay? I mean, an app that works with a million events a day will not work on the Ethereum blockchain right now. So I'm saying that there are different use cases. Some use cases require very high frequency event, and some other use cases requiring very low frequency event. And just because of the scale problem, the killer app will definitely be one of those, of the low frequency. And organization is just that. So he's saying that DAO will be the killer app just because of that. And I completely agree. So I'm saying that the current infrastructure is enough for sufficient activity. All it says is that at the early days, either you'll have low volume, or like low funds, small funds, or you have big funds that make big decisions. So you'll be limited by the number of decisions you make a day. So even if you have millions of people, but they also only make decisions of $100,000, it's not a big deal. So basically, what I'm saying is that the organization is already functional, because you see, it doesn't mean that when you say that you have a decentralized organization, it doesn't mean that the entire workforce is on the blockchain. You can have teams applying for funds of $100,000, and then they manage those funds off-chain, right? So an organization is just that application that can work very well also in low frequency and today. So that's the first answer. The second answer is that these projects on Ethereum that are working to scale up the blockchain are maturing in a rapid pace. And I think we'll already see working solutions at scale probably this year, and if not, definitely next. And the third answer is that you can actually scale up your own application by migrating a lot of the. So basically, one of the greatest solutions to the scaling problem of blockchain is something that is called off-chain computations. So it's a way to put much of the computation off-chain, not on the chain, but in a way that guarantees that the consensus. So there are some tricks to do that already. And that's most of the successful project like Plasma, that's what they are doing. However, you can also take your own application and make your own little off-chain architecture by yourself, and that's exactly what we're doing. So the next version that we're going to release will probably already have some level of off-chain components to it.
If you consider like different
Stellar is not relevant. It's not supplying the technology that we're needing at all. So right now, Ethereum is the only technology that actually works and provides what we need. But we're completely agnostic. Like if tomorrow there is a second technology which delivers it better, absolutely, yes, we will migrate. We will hold an application. We will be blockchain agnostic, basically.
But a company can build their B2C application on Stellar and still have their governance on.
Sure. Sure.
What is the utility of the token? Like, why do I need to hold that?
That's a good question. So, the utility of the token, I'll give you the, I'll give you the highlight, and then I can give you some examples. So, firstly, the utility, the way to do large-scale governance is by efficiently navigating the collective attention. That's why I told you in the beginning that there is a core problem between resilience, like to faulty behavior, and scalability, the ability to process large number of decisions in a unit of time. There is a core tension there. And the only way to go about that problem is by efficiently, including an additional layer to efficiently navigate the collective attention. In our case, I just mentioned we are doing this game, this prediction game that does that for us. So basically, this additional layer will be completely in our token. So we build the stack, and then we're also building application, but then there will be hundreds of applications, other applications that, by the way, are all interoperable with each other. So one application can communicate with another application because they're riding on the same open protocols, just as different web applications can interact with each other because they're riding HTTP, and it's an open protocol. So all of those applications, whenever they require large-scale governance, large-scale decision-making, they will have to have this additional game layer for collective for the navigation of the collective attention, and that layer will be managed by our token. So basically, whoever wants to make a prediction, for example, specifically in our current application, whenever someone wants to come make a prediction on a proposal, he would need to stake our tokens, which we call GEN. So that's like the first example. But the reason I'm giving the more high-level definition is because, that I would say that navigating collective attention is because there will be more instances, more materialization to this principle in other places.
But how will that work exactly? So I want to participate in one of the projects, or I want to vote. I'm going to have to go to Binance and buy Gen. Like how? So
there are two ways to think about it. One way is that the project becomes very widely adopted, and then the token becomes very liquid.
Commoditized.
And then holding Gen is kind of like holding Ether, right? Also the same for if you want to process computational Ethereum, you need to hold Ether. So in the same way, if you want to participate in this ecosystem of work, you need to hold Gen. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that applications can, at the interface level, can decide to completely hide that. Like they can basically ask you to hold just one token, whether it's their own token or whether it's Ether, or anything else, or our token, and then all of the swaps between different tokens make it below the hood. Under the hood.
Thank you.
Sure. In our case, we have some also. We also in the early days we also have the incentive for people to actually hold our token, but definitely, I'm sure that it will be a standard. Like I'm sure that all applications will eventually run on one token.
Matan,
yeah.
Really want to thank you. We're out of time for today. Anyone who's interested to learn more about Daostack and Gen and the process that they've been through, please feel free to to reach out afterwards or reach out to any one of the iAngels team members in the room. Thank you again so much for joining us today, and for you guys for coming for today's session. And good luck with everything.
Thanks.
We're in collaboration, so we'll keep you guys posted on how everything's going.
Cool.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you.